In 1954, in Britain, they didn't really have a film industry. But they made some movies once in a while. And one of the movies they made was Hobson's Choice. From a play. It's always good to make a film from a play. It's like film goals. You make a good play and make a good film. As a Dutch person, I knew the story from the Dutch radio play about that was made from this play. But in Dutch, it was called Graag Of Niet. And basically that translates as take it or leave it, which is what Hobson's Choice really is. And Hobson's Choice, it's an old English expression for the people who don't know it. It turns out, I looked it up, it's from a stable keeper in the 16th, 17th century who had a stable of horses, and then you came there and you took Hobson's Choice, which means take it or leave it. Whatever is there is you can have, but if it's not there, you can't have it. So the name of Hobson's Choice is very fitting for the play because it is about a Mr. Hobson who had a choice. So the Dutch version, the radio play is very good. I think it's straight up the play from 1916. Very well done. If you're Dutch, go take a look at it. I believe it's on YouTube or it's on archive.org. I've seen it there, so enjoy. It's in Dutch, so it's for Dutchies. The British film is by David Lean and had, I think the only person who's really famous that was in it was John Mills as Willie. All the others are people who were on the stage a lot. So Prunella Scales I know from as a name for stage people. They are wonderful. And Charles Laughton, of course, he's as Hobson. He's also very wonderful. The story is set in what they call the Greater Manchester area, and particularly in Salford. And what I really like about this movie is that it is recorded and filmed in the Greater Manchester area and Salford. So if they talk about Peel Park being the park that they go on Sunday, and when they go out, it is the actual park. If they say Peel Park, it is Peel Park. So yay! Very few times that happens in Hollywood movies when they say it's in Hollywood, it's going to be filmed somewhere other than where it's supposed to be filmed. Here it's on the nose, and I like that. There is a sequence in it where Maggie goes and visits Willie's lodgings in the poorer part of town, and in 1954 they still had all that old stuff, so they used all that old stuff. So yay for authenticity in that way. It is a British movie, and they do something that you never see in American movies. Of course, they do the local accents properly. Like the local Manchester, it's just a very blunt way of talking that they in the radio play they also transposed it to Dutch, very blunt talking. They talk pretty bluntly for very not impolite, just blunt, very on the nose. If it's raining out, they say it's raining out. Very very blunt, in a way that is actually. I'm not used to that for Brits, but it's kind of refreshing. And there are quite some people who need this in this story. This is Hobson is being a little potentate of a storekeeper. It's not okay. Story starts with Mr. Hobson, who is a storekeeper. He has a store in Boots, which they also make in house. He has 3 daughters, and he is a widower, so he is on his own as such, but the daughters are pretty much grown up, and he's annoyed with all these women telling him what to do, like be on time for lunch or you won't be having lunch. He hates that, and he's making them work in his shop because in 1880 he's the boss and he can say that. Does he pay them? No, he doesn't need to because he's the boss. It's 1880 and he can do that. And then people say, well, shouldn't they be getting married and you can get rid of them? And he says, oh, that's a good idea. Let's get them married, get rid of them. And then somebody else says, well, if you have them get married, they need a dowry. And then he says, I'm not going to pay any money for getting rid of them. I'll just keep them. So 3 girls, they're not girls, they're not little girls, they're all grown up under this guy, and the oldest of the 3 is Maggie. The other 2 are quite fashionable. It's like 1880, so they have bustle. I think this is the second bustle period. There you go. And they try to look very fashionable because you're supposed to do that. And this is a time when fashion is not optional. You have to take part or you're simply nobody. In a way that now we've forgotten. We haven't done that since the 1960s. My mother used to complain that she hated wearing dresses, but you could not go out in 50s without a dress. It was not an option. Just no. Or some touches of makeup. It was just no. And so they either dressed the part as the daughters of a pretty affluent shopkeeper, or not, which is what the oldest daughter does, Maggie. And Maggie is the sensible one. She kind of runs the store, and she's the one who says, Dad, be on time for lunch, or 1 o'clock, or there will be no lunch. And he says, I will go to the pub, and I will be there when I want to be there. And then she says, when he leaves, she says to everybody else, make it 1:30 so he can be in time for lunch, because he's going to be late. So we have Vicky, Alice, and Maggie as the oldest. And Vicky and Alice, they do have beaux, but they tried not to come around when the father is around, because they're kind of scared of Mr. Hobson. Also, one of them is actually a lawyer, and Hobson has already professed his hate of anything to do with the law. So there's that. The story appears to be going in a very normal fashion until Maggie starts to realize that she is not gonna. The father at some point says, "Hey, I'm gonna give everybody husbands," and then a moment later he says, "No, nobody's getting a husband," and she sort of gets the idea for what, and she starts to make her own plan, and that's what this film is about. And what is wonderful about this film is watch Maggie make her own plan, and in that plan she drags along Willie Mossop, the boots maker who learned his craft in the shop, who is lower class, because the family is like middle class, lower middle class, but affluent. And this boy, who was a boy once, but he's a man now, he started as a boy in the shop. He came from a workhouse. He is as low class as you can get. He has no education other than learning how to make boots. He can't read or write. It's that bad. And Maggie sees Willie, sees his hands, how they work, and realizes that this might be the way out. She emancipates herself on the spot, basically, drags Willie along, and Willie's mind is like blown. He's like all the time because his world is turned upside down. When I first heard the play, I've really felt for Maggie a lot for female empowerment of that moment. But the film shows very much how Willie regards it, because he's just standing next to Maggie while she speaks, and the look on his face is shows you how much his mind is blown. His world is... He came from nothing. He achieved something with being an apprentice and learning how to make boots, but he was always going to be a man who makes stuff, gets a little bit of money, goes home, and that's it. And she makes him the proprietor of his own store, the boss. She teaches him how to read. She teaches him how to stand up for himself. Literally coaches him how to do it. But she does it in a way that leaves him in his own value. Because she drags him along for the ride, but at every major junction, she stops and says, you know, I take this seriously. Do you want this? And he has a choice here. And if he chose the other way, she would have said, okay, let's make another deal and move on in that way. But at every junction, he stands, he thinks, and says, yes, I'm going to do this. We're going to do this together. And that's beautiful. This is, in that way, this is a beautiful movie. And it's an uplifting movie in that way. What is not uplifting, as such, is Hobson's own story. Hobson is an idiot. And he learns what it means to be an idiot. The hard way. And quite deservedly. Peanut Gallery is nodding.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Emancipation of the female, but also class emancipation, because that's basically what happens. Willie goes from a dirt poor lower class to lower middle class. He becomes, his children will go to a good school, and he's gone up in the world, and she emancipates him because there's not something that he could do. He need help to do that. You always need help to do that. Even her emancipation, also she needs his help to get her emancipation going. Because in 1880, as such, she could not own a business or a house.
Could talk to a bank.
Or talk to a bank. So what she does, the first round of money, she goes to Mrs. Hepworth, who the one richer lady who had come into the shop and said she liked the shoes that Willie made, and said, well, we were leaving Hobson's. We need money to set up our own store. And so he sits there. Mrs. Hepworth basically looks at Willie and she talks. But basically that's what Willie... This is how to get there. And I'm sure by the time they get to the bank, they will have done something similar. But then by that time, Willie was coaxed enough to be able to do it himself. So that was good. Interesting things I looked up is that she asked Mrs. Hepworth for £100 to borrow £100 for I think a year, and I calculated how much that is in current currency. It's about £15,000, about 19,000 US dollars. Which they paid back. For the £100, they rented a space. They got in supplies and tools. Set up an entire shop space, an entire workspace, lived for a year, because they lived at the back there as well. And in a year's time, they made it profitable enough that they could pay it back. 1 year time. That's not bad. As they get, just after they got out from the foot from Mr. Hobson, they plan to get married, of course, because male-female partnership either be a marriage or be something else, but they decided on a marriage. So they invited the sisters and their beaux for the marriage, and so quite a lot of things happen in the movie, and you should go watch. This is a good movie, so go watch it. So, but what I want to talk about lastly is Charles Laughton as Hobson, who has the only time that I've ever seen quite as strongly a what they call delirium tremens, DTs. He is alcohol addicted, and he has a delirium. And they show what that is like. And he gets the doctor in because he's thinking all kinds of stuff. And so he gets the doctor in, and the doctor tells him he has alcoholism. And he needs somebody to help him. Otherwise, he's going to be dead. I don't think I've ever seen in any other movie of the era, or quite a long time after, see alcoholism taken like that, as and in such a serious way. And maybe because it's in this movie that nobody did it again, because it's here. And Charles Laughton is really doing it well. It's upsetting to watch as such. This guy is killing himself with booze. And not in a drunken, brawling kind of way, but in a
constantly always drinking kind of way.
Yeah, sometimes they depict in Hollywood movies, but depict somebody as being, and it's not like that. It's just silent.
That's probably why he keeps on drinking, because he never, well, not never, but he keeps it on the rails. But he's still an alcoholist. As
an alcoholic, he goes to the pub every day and sits there a couple of hours just drinking beers, and that's enough for alcoholism. If you do that for 30, 40 years, you're an alcoholic, and that your liver is going to object, which is what happened. And the doctor, a very good Scottish doctor, because that's kind of a caricature image in England is Scottish doctors. The Scottish doctors are best because they're no nonsense. And this guy is no nonsense. He tells him, you keep the way going the way you are, you will die. And when the very, very first time in his life, or long time, he listens to advice, and he gets his daughters back in. The daughters have left already. They've married off. That's part of the plot if you want to see it. It's really good. But that happened, and he gets them back in, and he asks each of them, do you want to come and take care of dear old dad? And the other two are no. And then Maggie says, I'll have to ask Willie. And and Hobson, Willie has never been very outgoing with Hobson. And he says, well, I'll offer you back your old room and old room at the back, and you can live there. And then basically Maggie and Willie say, you know what, we're going back to our premises in the main road because we have large rooms there, and why do we want to be here? So they have to work it out, and it is Hobson's choice. Take it or leave it. And that's the point of the movie. And this is kind of an iconic movie. A lot of it's classic. This is one of those British classics. Yep. Makes me happy. Makes the peanut gallery happy too. She's smiling again.
About the loan, the £100 of loan, they actually did extremely well, because when I have watched a lot of Dragon's Den, and when an offer like that is made from somebody affluent, like seriously, they have the money to help, they just stick it into investments of little shops and stores. This is a little store. For this old lady, it's a little store. And it's like, I'll loan them the £100. But normally they ask for a percentage of your, because it's £15,000, you were just saying. So in actual like money that we understand, they would have asked for a percentage, like a 5% stake, a 10% stake. But that also literally means that they give up 10% of all of the profits in the entirety of the future of the company. And they didn't have to do that in this.
Mrs. Hepworth said she would be satisfied if Willie made all the shoes for her entire family. Because she said she had never had a better pair ever. And it's boots in those days. It's 1880, so everybody's wearing boots. Ladies as well, little bit of a heel. But you were working on it all day long. So little old lady with feet that don't hurt, it's worth her equivalent of £15,000, certainly.
And that again gets them talked about in the circles of Mrs.
Hepworth.
And that means that other social circle people of Mrs. Hepworth is going to be going to the store because she's raving, and her family is raving about the boots that Willie is making. So it's a win-win-win.
It's a win-win-win for everybody involved. So Mrs. Hepworth was happy to lend out the money, and not worried about the petty cash.
Well, that's one of the things that Maggie really impressed me with, because she understood the business end of things that had never been taught to her, but that she was working in that store probably from the day she turned 14.
Yeah.
And maybe she was 25 or so by the time the story starts. 27, 28. Yeah, a little bit on the older side. But she had learned how things worked, and she had schmoozed the customer. She says at one point I sell the factory shoes
that are not so good.
So my salesmanship gets those factory shoes actually sold, and Willie's
boots.
Willie's workmanship is selling the really good stuff to the people with good.
They sell themselves, yes.
They sell themselves, and that will be sold to people who can afford it. So she knows who the customers are that needs the factory shoes. She knows who the customers are that can buy the good boots, and that means she's been networking throughout that time, and she has targeted Mrs.
Hepworth.
For all this time. She selected her out in the last 5 years or so of her life. It's like, this is the woman that I will ask.
No, because Mrs. Hepworth actually put herself forward for that, because she complimented Willie where that was unusual. So that's why the name got around. The play itself, and therefore the movie, is very smartly written in events one after the other, and the whole thing about the other sisters. Just watch the movie, it's interesting. A lot of shenanigans, but it all fits together very neatly. And something was learned by some people. And I, as a modern idea, I think this. So the play is from 1916, even though it talks about 1880 as a time period which is for 1916 is like 25 years earlier, so a generation earlier. But in 1916, suffragettes and social changes of social classing was going on. It's not the start of it. It's sort of in the middle. People were thinking about it. So a story of self-empowerment of a young lady and a gentleman that comes with her is very forward-thinking in 1916. And they transposed that pretty good to 1954, which is 1954 is very much a time where people were in England. It was just after World War II, so there was basically just rebuilding. So maybe a little bit of oldie timiness, but they try not to bog themselves down in romance of oldie timiness. They do this story seriously. They take it seriously for what it is, and I like that. Yes, I realize oldie timiness is interesting, but it wasn't all roses and stuff back then. In fact, it wasn't at all roses and stuff. Yeah. There is a very... the print I got to watch was very good. There's a lovely Blu-ray remaster of it around, so get that one if you can. What I found weird about it as a piece of celluloid versus stuff that is being made in Hollywood at the same time is the music is very old-fashioned, kind of. I did look it up. It is specifically written for this, but it's very prominent in a way that it's kind of like it's telling it's a comedy, but it's not. This is not a comedy. This is a social. It's a drama with a little bit of a comical, not even terrifically much, but the music makes it feel like it's a comedy, and I don't think it is. So that sort of always made me go, the music is a little weird.
Recommendation? Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely watch this movie. This is one of the classics. It's very enjoyable. Great story. Wonderfully acted. Brenda de Banzie as Maggie is wonderful, and John Mills as Willie Mossop is of course wonderful, and Charles Laughton is very wonderful. Upsetting but wonderful. Yeah, he's not playing a nice guy. Is Hobson not nice? I think he's just dumb. It's just dumb, and he needed some teaching, and he got taught. There's one thing that was kind of interesting as Willie and Maggie get married. Willie is not in love with Maggie, and Maggie is not. I don't think she's particularly in love with Willie as such, though we don't know, because Willie says that he's not in love with her to start with, and then later when they decide, yes, we're going to do it, and then after the nuptials, they have to go to bed together, and it's a lovely scene. And the thing that I thought was very striking is, and it's all in the mime of the actors doing that the next day, they have a smile on their face. You know?
Yeah.
The sex was good. And I think that the film understands, and I think the play also, but I don't know if it was in the mime of the play as well, because I don't know what the stage instructions for the play are. It might have been in there. But the film certainly understands that for marriage to work, if the sex is good, it's very helpful. And it could have, if it had not been good, that would have been upsetting, because they're not marrying under the bestest of circumstances. She is sort of taking what she can get. She doesn't dislike what she can get, but it's not like true love or anything. And he is sort of being dragged along by this whirlwind of a lady. And he doesn't dislike her, but it's not true love or anything. So it could have not worked, but it did. And I like that. It's just the smile on both of their faces is just, yeah. Okay. This is, yeah. It's a feel-good movie in that sense, that it makes real people, real adversities, and they're really getting on with it. So, yeah, I like. So the film is set in 1880, I think 1880, and then it's a year later. The next part is 1881, and second bustle period. So that's a picture. And, I happen to have a book about that. Mode Illustrée from 1880. There you go. I'll show you some of the pictures of that. Bunch of things they do right in the film is the dresses are pretty much spot on. Look, see, the hair I have a little bit of an issue with. Hair is always difficult, even when they get the dresses right. Sometimes they still go like hair and makeup. Well, makeup you have to have, but it's black and white movie, so it's more makeup is not so prominent as it is in a color movie. So they wouldn't have worn makeup, but it's fine if they have some for the black and white, sure. But hair is hair outside of the period it belongs in usually looks ridiculous, and so they always downplay it, and they do here. Yes, they do some of the updos, but actual people, they would have more elaborate hairstyles. Book is a little big. So this is a little bit like Maggie would have it. I'll show it properly to you. I'm showing it to the peanut gallery. So Maggie, and you see this is exactly what she would wear. But she have the hair at the back. They'd have it longer, and the fashionable the sisters would have it way more fashionably than that, in elaborate hairstyles all over the place. This is a very heavy book. Oh, there you go. Elaborate hairstyles. And so they downplayed that a little bit because it just doesn't look right in 54. You don't want to look ridiculous. You want to look good, but not ridiculous. But the dresses are really good. The one thing I did notice, because they have like the shop of shoes, so they had to do a display of shoes, and I think they did some stock. They got some stock stuff, because there should be like 1880s. It's like boots, little boots with about heels that big, so it's not just a little bit of a heel, but not too much. And there's a couple of them 54 shoes, which, if you see anything that's longer than this, it's after World War II. Because before that, they didn't have the technology to make the heels that big and not have them break all the time. So, yeah. No. Okay, but they don't walk around on them. It's just in display. So I think it's just the set dressing that went wrong there. It's okay. So, that's like niggly little nigglies, that's negligible. And that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.